Hello everyone, we are students from CDEV, group 208 and team 2, and in this video we will talk about some very interesting topics in biology. My name is Romina Lisa Garcia Ibarra, and to begin we will talk about animal and plant cells and their organelles. First of all, what is a cell? The cell is the smallest and most functional fundamental unit of all living beings. Cells have several characteristics, such as being complex and highly organized, having the ability to replicate, needed energy, and interacting with the environment. They can be diverse, but there are three basic structures found in all of them. The cell membrane, which acts as a barrier with outside environment, the cytoplasm, which is made of gel-like fluid called cytosol, in which different structures are dispersed along, the cytoskeleton, a set of proteins that give the cell its shape and its structure, and lastly, the genetic material or DNA, which is responsible for storing information to create new cells and all internal components. Cells are classified as prokaryotic and eukaryotic. Eukaryotic are distinguished by having a nucleus and organelles. Organelles are structures with specific functions in the cell. Within eukaryotes, there is also a division in two types. They are the animal and plant cells. Starting with the plant cells, it is important to highlight that they are the only ones that have a cell wall, which allows the passage of carbon dioxide, oxygen, and water. They are also different because they contain chloroplasts and vacuoles. Chloroplasts are double membrane structures that contain stroma. Within the stroma, there are membranous sacs called stylocoids, where we find chlorophyll. It is a green pigment that converts sunlight into ATP, which in plants is to make sugars. Continuing with other organelles found in both animal and plant cells, we have the nucleus, one of the most important structures, which is surrounded by the nuclear envelope that allows passage of ions and regulates the flow of proteins and RNA. Inside the nucleus, there is a chromatin. It's a substance intertwined with DNA and proteins to feed into the nucleus. Additionally, we have the nucleolus, is where ribosomes are produced. The function of ribosomes is synthesize proteins. Outside the nucleus, we can see the endoplasmatic reticulum, both raw, involving in protein synthesis, and smooth, which detoxifies drugs and contains enzymes that synthesize membrane lipids. There are also vesicles that are tiny sacs that transport biological molecules in and out of the cell. We have sometimes some vesicles that are lysosomes that contain digestive enzymes that break down lipids, proteins, and more. On the other hand, we have peroxisomes, having enzymes to break down amino acids, long chains, etc. Another organelle is the Golgi apparatus, which is basically a stack of membranes that modifies and sorts proteins. There is also the mitochondria, which has a double membrane where crystals are formed. Here, cellular respiration takes place and ATP is produced. Lastly, I will mention centrioles, which are made of microtubules that are proteins, and their function is to organize these proteins. That's all from my side about the cell, animal and plant cell, which I hope you find helpful. Now let's move on to the more topics.
I'm Corina Mendoza, and I'm going to explain the characteristics of living things. The first characteristic is about they are made of cells. What's mean that? Well, the smallest unit of life is the cell. All living things are made of them. The second one are about they have metabolism. When we talk about that, we refer to the chemical reaction of transforming molecules to sustain life. You know the characteristic of living thing that explain what is homeostasis? This is the maintenance of internal condition, depends on your body organ system. For the number 4 is response to stimuli. They have a variety them adjust to respond to the change. The characteristic number 7 is possessed DNA. This contains all genetic information. The development of an organism is a set of changes that occur called growth, which is the characteristic number 6. For the seventh characteristic, explain the reproduce. Everything can reproduce, but there are two types, sexual or asexual. And for the last is evolve. This tell about how population of organisms change over time to better adapt. This is all for the characteristics. The next topic is the difference between eukaryotic and prokaryotic cells. The prokaryotic cell doesn't have nucleus, and the eukaryotic they have. The eukaryotic cell is bigger than prokaryotics. In reproduction, can reproduce for the sexual way, and prokaryotic is an asexual process.
I'm going to talk about the story of the microscope and cell theory. In the 1st century AD, Seneca discovered that by using a transparent spherical container filled with water, it was possible to observe small and fine traces of large size with complete clarity. This idea led to the creation of small magnifying glasses in the year 1000, which are now considered the first microscopes. By the end of the 16th century, a Dutch father and son Peter Nanmer Haas and Zacharias Hansen created the first compound microscope. The lens used to build this microscope were converged, meaning their function was to focus the light ray passing through them at a point. This device allowed objects to be magnified between 3 and 9 times. In 1665, Robert Hooke designed a microscope made of 3 lenses. To improve the quality of the image, he passes the light generated by an oil lamp through a flask filled with water, which allowed him to diffuse the light and illuminate the sample. With this microscope, Hooke was able to magnify the samples between 20 and 50 times their actual size. Among his observations, Hooke made an important discovery when he examined a thin slice of cork under the microscope. He could see a regular arrangement of tiny, similar structures imperceptible to the human eye, which he called cells. In London in 1667, Anton van Leeuwenhoek was a master at making spherical lenses, placing them between two metal plates with adjustable screws that allowed him to focus the sample. This design improved the microscope and allowed objects to be magnified between 200 and 300 times. A curious fact is that the first microscopes were used to study insects and were nicknamed flea glasses. Cells are too small to be observed with the naked eye, so their study was mainly based on the microscope. On the other hand, the cell theory proposes that living beings, regardless of their difference, have in common that they are made up of cells. This suggests that there is an evolutionary relationship among living beings, and this relationship occurs through the fundamental unit of life, which is the cell. This theory was proposed by Matthias Leiden, Theodor Swan, and Rudolf Virchow, and it's based on observations of Robert Hooke and Anton van Leeuwenhoek, among others. The work of these scientists led them to propose a series of characteristics shared by all cells. A living beings are made up of cells. It is a physiological unit of a living beings. Every cell comes from pre-existing cell. The cell contains hereditary material DNA. A fifth possibility is now considered disease starts in the cells. In conclusion, all vital functions take place within the cells of their environment.
Hi, my name is Samantha and I will explain the cell transport. First, there are two types of cell transport, passive and active. I will explain the passive transport. We can define like a type of membrane transport that does not require energy to move substance across cell membranes. Instead of using cellular energy like active transport, passive transport relies on the second law of thermodynamics to drive the movement of substance across the cell membrane. In the passive transport, we can explain the diffusion, osmosis, and facilitated diffusion. The diffusion refers to the process by which the molecules move from a higher concentration to an area of lower concentrations. This refers to the natural movement of the cell, because they has no control over the speed or direction. This is defined from the regions of the highest concentration to the lowest. Osmosis is the diffusion of water through a semi-permeable membrane that separates two solutions with different concentrations of solute. This is a movement of water molecules, and again, pass through a semi-permeable membrane from the highest to the lowest concentrations area. Facilitated disseminations refers to a specific transport of proteins that help to movement of molecules of considerable size. There are two types of proteins, transport proteins and channel proteins. These proteins shape to enable the molecule to pass from one side of membrane to other. And this is all of my part. Thank you for the attention.
Hello, my name is Tomás and let's go with my part. Active transport is when a carrier protein moves molecules or ions across the membrane against a concentration gradient that requires cell energy. That is when the movement goes from an area of low concentration to a place of high concentration. Active transport is an energy-driven process where membrane proteins transport molecules across cells, mainly classified as primary or secondary, based on how energy is coupled to fuel this mechanism. The forming constitutes the means by which a chemical reaction, e.g., ATP hydrolysis, powers the direct transport of molecules to establish specific concentration gradients, as seen with sodium potassium ATPase and hydrogen ATPase pumps. Endocytosis. When the cell needs to acquire extensive materials from the cellular environment, they are engulfed by the plasma membrane and transported through vesicles. This phenomenon requires energy and is called endocytosis. Endocytosis has three types of activities: pinocytosis, receptor-mediated endocytosis, and phagocytosis. In pinocytosis, the plasma membrane forms a dimple that encloses contents outside the cytosol. Receptor-mediated endocytosis involves binding molecules from the cell's environment to molecules on the membrane, which falls into a well and engulfs it. This process allows the introduction of hormones and lipoproteins. Exocytosis. The cell needs to invest energy to release certain substances, which are enclosed in vesicles that fuse with the plasma membrane to diffuse their contents out of the cytosol. Exocytosis is the fusion of secretory vesicles with the plasma membrane and results in the discharge of vesicle content into the extracellular space and the incorporation of new proteins and lipids into the plasma membrane. Exocytosis can be constitutive, all cells, or regulated, especially as cells such as neurons, endocrine, and exocrine cells. Regulated exocytosis is usually, but not always, triggered by an increase in the cytosolic free Ca2+ concentration. In neurons and endocrine cells, a small proportion of regulated secretory vesicles are ready to fuse with the plasma membrane in response to cell stimulation, but the majority are kept in reserve for subsequent stimulation by linkage to a filamentous network of synapses in neurons or actin in endocrine cells.
Hello, how are you? My name is Christian, and today I will talk to you about the levels of organization and homeostasis. Section 1. Levels of organization. Our body is an incredibly complex structure, but its functionality is based on hierarchical organization, like Russian nesting dolls fitting inside one another, starting with the smallest level, atoms, the fundamental building blocks of matter, combine to form molecules such as proteins and water. These molecules in turn assemble into organelles, structures with specific functions inside cells, like mitochondria, which produce energy. Millions of cells with similar structures and functions from tissues, muscular, nervous, bone, in the others. Tissues combine to build organs, hair, lungs, stomach, each with a particular function. Finally, multiple organs work together in coordinated system, digestive, respiratory, and circulatory, to sustain life. Each level depends on the previous one, creating an intricate network of interaction that allow the entire organism to function. Section 2. Homeostasis. Now, let's talk about homeostasis, which is the body's ability to maintain internal balance regardless of external changes. Here are some examples. Body temperature. If it's hot, we switch to cold down. If it's cold, we shiver to warm up. Blood glucose levels. If we eat something sweet, the body raises insulin to regulate blood sugar. Water balance. If we drink too much water, the body eliminates the excess through urine. Thanks to homeostasis, our body adapts and continues to function efficiently. And with that, we reach our conclusion. In summary, the levels of organization show us how our body is structured, and homeostasis helps us maintain balance. Thank you.
Hi, in this video I'm going to explain three very important topics. The topics are pregnancies, addictions, and obesity. I will begin by explaining what pregnancies is in a very brief way. The pregnancies is the period between conception, is the fertilization of an egg by a sperm and birth. During this period, the fertilized egg develops in the uterus. In humans, pregnancies last approximately 288 days, also called gestation and gravidity. There are various complications during pregnancies, and in this case, we will talk about two that are of great importance. The first complication will be preeclampsia, which is increased blood pressure during pregnancies and or delivery, directly affecting the brain, kidneys, lungs, and hair. And the second, and no less important, is eclampsia, which consists of is a complication of preeclampsia where seizures occur during labor, which can lead to neurological damage. The next topic is addictions. In this case, we will only talk about addictions to social networks and drugs. The addictions are a chronic and relapsing mental disorder, that is, they alternate periods of more uncontrolled consumptions with periods of abstinence in which consumption is abandoned. Addiction to social networks is something that is seen constantly today, and although something it is of great help of simple entertainment, we must know how to use it in the correctly way and not end up creating a great addiction. The drug addiction is the dependence of a substance to sustain yourself on a daily basis. It's highly harmful. Its your addiction is to drugs, and it causes various negative changes depending of the drugs you use. And the final topic is obesity. The obesity is an abnormal or excessive accumulation of fat that can be harmful to health. Nowadays, we can see teenagers do not have a very good diet, and that is why it is necessary to avoid this type of diet and thus maintain a healthy weight that is good for our health. And that will be all for these three topics. Thank you for your attention.